Hello everyone. Today I thought of sharing with you all like 10 rights that you have in your life. Sometimes you don't know that you have it. So I thought why not share about this because I've seen that like people are people are not being aware of this right just makes them stay in toxic environment and abusive environment, whereas if they knew about this, they would have made a different choice in their life. So let me share this. I chose some 10 rights. Actually, there's more to it than this, but I've chosen these 10 rights that I felt resonated and would like to share with you all that. So, first one is I have the right to make decisions. This means simply you have the right to make decisions. So like, let's say you made a decision to quit your job because you feel like it's draining your energy. And when you come and tell your parents about it, and they start questioning your decision. And sometimes you might listen to them and then just go back to the same jobs because your parents said that. But in reality, your parents had no idea how much drained you feel and how much that affects on your health, mental health, physical health. And then you just decide just because your parents said to give up on your decision. No, don't do that. You have the right to make a decision, make decisions in your life. You know your life the best. You know what you're going through at work. And you have the right to make decisions, remember. And as an adult, you can make your own decisions. Keep that in mind because sometimes people just outsource to make decisions for themselves to other people. Don't do it. You are your authority, you are your power. You are the captain of your ship, like life of, I mean, navigate the way you want it. Don't outsource your decisions. Decisions gives you the power because through a decision you can change the direction of your life. So first one, you have the right to make decisions. Sounds simple, but it has a lot of consequences when we are not following through. Okay, the second one is you have the right to be in a non-abusive environment. So let's say you have a relationship and then like the partner is just yelling at you, you know, and you continue to be in this relationship not knowing that you have the right to leave a non like you have the right to leave a abusive environment. You don't need to be in that. And sometimes people are not aware when they are getting emotionally abused because physical abuse, it's obvious. But when it comes to emotional abuse, it doesn't, like you can't see it. But there's a huge impact on your mental health. So it's very important and just know that you have the right to be in a non-abusive environment. Whenever you see there's a lot of abuse happening, you know what you need to do. And don't tolerate. I mean, so I have seen women, like because I'm talking to different clients, I've seen clients stay in abusive environment, like without knowing like that they have the right to leave. They don't need to stay in that. That is one of your right. Claim it. Until you claim it, nothing happens. And the third one is you have the right to take care of yourself no matter what. Whatever happens, you have the right to take care of yourself. And sometimes we are being said that if you're taking care of yourself, you're being selfish. But that's not true. Opposite is the truth. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're being selfish. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you'll be in a very bad place where you will spread that like frustration and resentment around you, which creates a huge impact to the environment that you are in. So you have the right to take care of yourself no matter what. Sometimes we just don't give ourselves the priority. We feel bad to put ourselves first because we have been so like in the second place or third place. We don't feel like we have the right or we deserve to be taking, like we are deserved to be given priority. That's very sad. And then the fourth one is you have the right to change your mind at any time. Remember, like sometimes you might have said something to another person, but remember that you have the right to change your mind. This sounds simple, but I've seen just because they have given a word that they just go on in the environment where they no longer, like that doesn't really give them the well-being, like that is not the right place for them to be in. But just because they have given the word, because of that past decision or whatever that promise that you've given, you just kept on living in, even though you feel drained, you feel so not right, you just continue to be in there. But remember, you have the right to change your mind at any time because you are not a fixed entity that you just like be just like that. You're constantly evolving, you're constantly changing. When you started this video and right now the time like some 5 minutes has passed, maybe you two different people. We are constantly evolving. So remember, you have the right to change your mind at any time. This I've seen that sometimes people have given their word for a partner that they're going to be there the rest of their life, but after a few years, they see that they fall out of the love, and at the same time, they don't have, like, they feel very drained to be in their relation because maybe the other person has evolved more, whatever the reason, I don't know. There could be numerous reasons, and they're no longer like in the same path and aligning with each other. In fact, they don't connect with anymore. But still, they keep on going in their life, not knowing that they have the right to change their mind. It's okay. I mean, like, imagine that you stay in that context, making both the person miserable. Isn't that better that you just separate? It doesn't make sense. Okay, the next one is you have the right to terminate conversations with people whom make you feel put down and humiliated. At any time, if you're feeling that you are being ridiculed or like humiliated and you're being belittled, demeaned, remember that you have the right to terminate the conversations. And sometimes even distance yourself from these people who just treat you in a very bad way, like belittle you, demean you. And I'm seeing this happening, especially when it comes to narcissistic individuals, how they just belittle people, put them down, and sometimes they plan how they're going to do this. And if you are in a, like, let's say if you're in a job, and in this environment, you are getting humiliated and put down all the time, you got to speak up for yourself, or you got to terminate these conversations and have distance from them. It's very important. You need to have your boundaries. You got to say no to these things. That's where these boundaries coming in. But knowing your rights really helps you to strengthen your boundaries. And I've seen sometimes, like, when I see clients, I talk about oneness, of course, but when it comes to that particular individual, sometimes more than they need to hear about the oneness, they need to hear about the boundaries. They need to see that where they end and the other person starts. Because it's very, very, very important. And I've seen, especially women, having very loose boundaries and getting abused and like emotionally in every way. Don't do this to yourself. You don't deserve any of this. Know your rights. That's the first step. When we don't know our rights, like we tend to get like caught up with these things and just tolerate. No. In fact, like when it comes to narcissism, like narcissistic individuals, the best is sometimes to take a break. Like if a client comes to me and share about their narcissistic abuse, the best thing that they can do for themselves and taking a break. That's how they can heal. And I've seen like clients coming to me and how when they just leave that abusive environment, when they take that distance from these toxic people, those who just put down and humiliate them, their life starts thriving. I have so many cases like clients who just like distance themselves from these toxic people and their lives just start going up, up, up. It's very satisfying to witness and remember that you have the right to terminate this conversation and also get distance from these toxic people. And then the sixth one is you have the right not to be responsible for others' behaviors, actions, feelings, or problems. This also I've seen, like, especially empaths, when they see someone is in a problem, they immediately want to get involved and fix their problem or solve their problem for them. But doing that just makes the other person not take responsibility for their life and you take over responsibility for another person. Until they take responsibility, they would never learn it. And in fact, they would just avoid taking responsibility. And you are hindering someone's learning curve, learning process. You need to let the other person to take responsibility for their life. I've seen this. And you have the right to not take risk, even if your partner's problem. It's not your problem. That's his problem for him to take care of. I'm telling this because I know empaths how they get involved in other people's problems and they're so drained that they don't even have energy for themselves anymore. Why are you doing this? Here I mentioned behaviors, actions, feelings, or problems. Here I talked about problems. And the next thing I would like to talk about people, especially empaths, they take responsibility for other people's emotions. You got to sit and like whenever some situation happens, some emotional encounter where you feel like you absorbed with the other person's emotion, the first thing is you need to sit and see what is my feelings, what is my emotions, what is their emotions. You're not responsible for another person's emotions. That's their responsibility to manage or tackle with their emotions. What empaths does is they take up other person's emotions on themselves in order to like make them feel better so they can feel better. Remember, it's not your responsibility to manage another person. That's their emotions for them to handle. Let them handle that. I've seen this with so many clients, like taking up other. Remember, you need to know what are you need to connect with your inner life and connect with your own emotions. Very important. You need to know what your emotions and the other person's emotion. And you're responsible for yours. Remember. And then the next right is you have the right to make mistakes and not be perfect. It's okay to make mistakes. I know, like, this is there with so many people, it's okay to make mistakes. If you have seen that all the mistakes that you have done in your past made you who you are right now, that really made you ponder in your life and just go to the next level. And that's when you made a different choice, maybe to sign up the coach or maybe to do a course or something very different than what you do. You have the right to make mistakes and not to be perfect. It's okay if your first relationship doesn't go so well. You have the right to make mistakes. Who can find the partner just like in one, just by having a relationship with the first partner? How can that? I've seen that the people who just go with the first man they've ever dated, like some women I've seen, they end up in a narcissistic, abusive relationship and they don't even know what his other possibilities are, what other type of men out there. They don't even have any idea. So it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay your first relationship goes bad. You don't need to be perfect. Let's say your first business just doesn't work out. It becomes a failure. It's okay. You made a mistake. Now you know how not to do the business because that didn't go right. So you learn from it. You know, before my coaching, I also did different business. Like I had a teaching school where I taught English. And at that time, I realized that that is not what I wanted to do, but I wanted to teach, but not the subject English. Through that, I learned that, okay, I love teaching, but this is not the subject. See, even though I didn't continue to teach English, I learned from that experience. So there are no mistakes, only feedback. Remember that you have the right to make mistakes and you don't need to be perfect. Like, let's say you want to like you start cooking and your first dish, first thing, like let's say you start making some cauliflower curry and that became a disaster. Of course, it's fine. You're learning, still learning how to cook. That's the process. You have the right to make mistakes. I'm telling this again and again because I know some people need to hear this. You don't need to be perfect. Create an imperfect dish. Create a imperfect video. Make mistakes. And then the next one is you have the right to be angry at someone you love. Why do I say this? Because some people, especially women, I've seen that whatever the anger that they feel with the partner, they just swallow it up back again. And this is not good for you. What you are doing is a huge force. You are just putting that back again. And this is no joke because I've seen that energetically this is really bad because how you're putting that anger back onto your body is like I've seen that women have problems with bones and the density of the bone is very low. And the reason is because these energetic components at work, because you're putting so much force back in yourself, this effect even on your bones. I've seen fragile bones women having like why? Because one of the biggest reason is they just swallow their anger back again. You have the right to be angry. It's an emotion. You have the right to express your emotion. I mean, when I say anger, this doesn't mean don't take it into an extreme level where just being very abusive. And I'm not talking about this. I'm talking a healthy level of anger. It's okay to be angry at someone you love. Of course, we feel anger. And this is being a human. And those religious concepts and all that people try to put idealized versions and they try to live up to this, and it's so difficult. You don't need to. Doesn't make sense. And then the next one is you have the right to exit a relationship at your choice at any time. Remember that. Some women stay in an abusive environment. I'm just sharing this because I know how much women stay in abusive environments. You have the right to exit a relationship at any time. Sometimes it might have been all right, but then if it becomes to a level where it is becoming abusive, you have the right to exit a relationship. Sometimes your partner would say, no, you can't exit a relationship. It's supposed to be mutual. You can't do just, and then you just listen to it and no, you have the right to exit when you see that it is abusive, it is emotionally abusive, it is like physically abusive. You got to exit such an environment. Remember, I know these rights will really help you to strengthen your boundaries because I've seen women how much they tolerate like very, very inappropriate behaviors sometimes. You don't need to be tolerating of these any longer. You need to know your rights. And then the next one is you have the right to say no. Remember, no is a complete sentence. You don't even need to reason that no. Some people don't know that they can say no. If they don't feel comfortable doing something, just simply say no. Don't force yourself to say it. Like sometimes people say yes when the whole body says no. Why do you do that? When you feel like no, when you don't feel comfortable doing something, just say no. You don't need to please anyone. It's very important that you start saying no. I've seen how people try to be pleasing other people and they don't even want to say no. They're so afraid that they would get abandoned or any other reasons. Remember, you have the right to say no. And it's a complete thing. You don't even need to resend your no. It's just that simple. I believe this really helps you, especially to strengthen your boundaries and know your rights. This is very important, especially if you are in a journey of loving yourself more and in a self-love journey, you got to know your rights. Until you know your rights, you would know your boundaries. Thank you.